In this video, I want to share with you a drum kit preset I've created within Logic, and I'm trying to recreate the drums from the popular Billie Eilish song, Birds of a Feather. And my goal with this was to use all stock Logic sounds. So I'm using this stock Logic drummer here, and then also use all stock Logic plugins. So anyone that owns Logic, you'll be able to download this preset and you'll be able to use these drums in your songs. Let me just play it for you so you can see where I've ended up with it. So that's my finished drum sound. Let me bypass all the processing for now and you can hear what the original unmixed drum kit sounded like. And then with all the processing added, so the final mix sounded like this. So yeah, we've come quite a way from the original raw drums. So let me take you through step by step on how we got to this point. So the first thing I did was just look at drum selection and make sure that I'm selecting the best pieces of the drum kit that are closest to what I'm hearing in the original song. And so one thing I really notice about the kick is that it's a super low, deep, subby, punchy kick. So I went with this 60s deep kick here. Just felt like it had all of the natural low end that I'm hearing in the original track that I could enhance and use rather than having to use something like, you know, this one here, where it doesn't have that natural low end. So yes, that's why I went for the 60s deep kick here. It's the closest thing to that original kick that I hear on the track. The next thing is the snare. And this one, I've gone with the deep maple snare. It's a super, super deep snare on the original track. And so this was the closest thing I could find to that, but I still had to do a lot of processing to try and get this close. So you can see I've tuned it all the way down. So this is what it originally sounded like with all of this off. So that's the original deep snare. And then I've tuned it all the way down and I'm dampening it. So this is tuning it all the way down and then dampening it so that it gets rid of a lot of that extra ring. So it's just a really tight, thuddy snare at this point. And then the only other piece of the drum kit I've used for this song, because it's really just kick, snare, and hi-hat. There's not a lot of toms or cymbals going on. So I've just stuck with the vintage dark hi-hat here. Now let's look at the individual processing on each of the channels. So starting with the kicks, if you've watched my other videos, you'll know that I like to bus the individual kick mics together so that I can process them together. So that's what's going on here. Both of the kick mics, the kick in and the kick out mic, are routed to bus 1, which shows up here. And then I can process both of these kicks together. So it looks like just a little bit of EQ on the kick in mic, just taking out some of the low mids. Very subtle move there. And then on the overall kicks bus, if we have a listen to that, we've got some more EQ, mainly just rolling off the really low subs and adding this 2 dB boost at around 50 Hertz. So that sounds like this. And then it looks like this is a phase inversion, just flipping the phase to get it to line up better with the overheads. We can hear this in context. So if I solo both the individual kick mics and the overheads without the phase flipped, this is what it sounds like. And then with the phase flipped. There's a little bit more processing on the kicks bus. So I'm sending this to a parallel channel. So bus 2, which shows up here. And this is drum parallel. And what this is a just parallel compression channel. So I'll start with this muted and then I'll bring it in and you can hear what it's adding. And so it's just adding a lot of punch to the kick drum. The settings here are using the classic VCA compressor and 10:1 ratio, and yeah, just set the threshold. And then the other thing we have on the kick bus is another send to bus 4, which shows up here. And this is this kick squeeze channel, I've called it here. So it's interesting, this one, I'm using Chroma Glow and using this squeeze model here, which is, I mean, this is a distortion plugin, but I'm hearing a lot of just thick compression and smacky attack coming from this. So again, I'll start with this muted and then I'll unmute it and you can hear what it's adding. So it's subtle, but it just adds a little bit more impact, a little bit more smack to the kick drum. And then moving on to the snare, we've got some EQ. So this is on the snare top mic. So I'm boosting a little bit of the fundamental and then pulling out a lot of the boxy low mids. So here's what this sounds like. Just helps it to sound a lot cleaner. Then we have another instance of Chroma Glow. So this one using this squeeze model again. So it's going to help to add a lot of smack to the snare. So here's what that sounds like. So I probably should have done a better job of matching up the output level here because we are getting a lot of gain increase, but you can hear that it does add smack to the snare drum. Next thing is a EQ. So this is a Pultec emulation. Looks like I'm adding a little bit of mid-range, a couple of dB at 1.6K. And then, am I doing anything else? Yeah, it looks like just driving the output of this all the way. So here's what this sounds like. And then finally, we've got just a high shelf just to help the snare to come forward a little bit more. So that's the snare top mic. On the bottom mic, looks like just a little bit of Chroma Glow. So here's what this sounds like. And then moving on to the hi-hat mic, I've added this compressor, and really what I'm trying to do with this is tuck the hi-hat back a little bit more in the mix and not have it so pokey, because in a song like this, the hi-hat's playing so softly and it's really just sort of sitting behind the drums and I don't want it to poke out too much. So I've set the release time really long. So this is like a 1.6 second release time. And then pretty slow attack, 4:1 ratio, and just set the threshold to the amount of gain reduction that you would like. So here's what this sounds like. I'll start with it off and then I'll engage it. So what it's doing is making those accents more accented, essentially, in relation to the rest of the hi-hat hits. So it kind of just makes the hi-hat dance a little bit more and feel a little bit more alive, rather than all of the hits sounding closer to the same velocity, if that makes sense. I'm not using any tom mics for this mix, just using the overheads here. So let's have a listen to what that sounds like. Cool, so the first thing I'm doing is just swapping the left and right channels because I wanted to switch the perspective from what it is now, which is audience perspective, and bring it over to drummer's perspective to match up with the original song. And I just like drummer's perspective in general. So that's what this is doing. So if we engage this, you'll hear the hi-hat switches over to the left-hand side of the stereo field. And then there's this compressor, similar move, trying to just push the overheads back a little bit in the mix. So we've got this long release time, and yeah, just 2:1 ratio this time. And let's hear what this does. So we can hear the snares popping out a lot more in relation to the hi-hats. So let's listen to that one more time. So this is with it off. Now when I engage it, listen to what the snare is doing. So it just helps the snare to pop out a little bit more in this track. Then finally, the room mics here. So here's what they sounded like on their own. So you can see you're only hearing the snare because within Logic, I've turned off the send to the room for the kick and the hi-hat. And so it's only the snare that's sending to this room because it's a very tight, dry sound. But I just wanted to add a little bit more stereo-ness, if that's a word, stereo energy to the snare drum. So I'm sending to this channel here. And then this EQ move is basically to take out all of the low end so that it's only really the mid and high frequencies that are just kind of sticking out on the sides, because I didn't want this to sound super muddy and wide. I just wanted to just have a little bit more high frequency energy from the snare out wide. So if I engage this is what it sounds like. And so let me play the whole drum mix with this room mic muted, and then I'll unmute it and you can see what it's adding to the snare drum. Let's have a listen. Yeah, so it's very subtle, just gives a little bit of life to the snare drum. And so the last channel here is this leak channel, which I'm not doing anything to, just set the level. So that's it. I did have a go at trying to see if I could make this tambourine sound good because, well, there are hi-hats in the original song, but there's a tambourine kind of playing the whole time. And I did try and make this tambourine sound good, but honestly, the tambourine in Logic's drummer here, I can't make sound good. It sounds pretty awful. So moving on to the overall processing on the drum bus now. So the first thing I'm doing is just a little bit of drum bus compression. So this is the vintage VCA. I guess this is modeled on a SSL bus compressor. So 2:1 ratio, pretty fast release, slow attack. And I think I'm only doing a couple of dB of reduction here. So let's have a listen to what this is doing. Yeah, it's kind of just pushing the hi-hat back a little bit, just kind of gluing everything into place. And it's helping the kick drum, especially, I feel like just to pop that tiny bit more. So the final thing on the drum bus is just this Pulsec EQ, and it looks like just boosting a bunch of high end around 10K. And yeah, that's all I'm doing with this EQ. So I'll start with this off and then I'll engage it and we can hear what this is doing. So that's the final drum sound. Once again, this is without any processing. And now with the processing. So yeah, I think it came out pretty well, and it was a fun challenge to be able to try and do this and achieve all this with Logic's stock sounds and the stock plugins that come within Logic here. And it does sound, to my ears, pretty close to the original. So I hope that's helpful to see how you can use minimal processing really. I'm not doing a whole lot, just a couple of plugins on each channel here. But just using minimal processing to achieve a sound that is current and that is popular right now. And thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.